Hello, friends. In the last lecture, we discussed about what the American economy uh, is doing to reduce its carbon footprint, what the policymakers plan to do. And for doing this, the American government has set aside certain money. We would be looking into what support the American government is giving in order to reduce the carbon footprint. We all said that in order to achieve this reduction in carbon footprint within the framework of market economy, climate finance becomes very crucial, and it is the point of contention even in the climate change negotiations. But what we are going to look today is not the climate finance being provided by the developed world to the developing world, but the climate finance which would be internally made available to the American economy for reducing its own carbon footprint and not the global carbon footprint. So let us have a look at this issue because this would have a bearing on the climate justice. So the money for climate action, which the White House has proposed, it comes in the form of an act which is called as a IRA. I stands for inflation, R stands for reduction, A stands for act. So the act itself is not named as some green act or something like that, but the declared aim of the act is to reduce the inflation in the American economy. Uh, Still, uh, though the aim is to reduce the inflation, there are certain provisions in the act, and that we are going to look into, which would help reducing the carbon footprint. So, or in other words, it would provide the money for climate action. So, what is this IRA? As I said, IRA is the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a federal legislation to achieve the climate change problem. And the plan is to invest about $400 billion US dollars in order to strengthen the energy security and climate change. That is what the act says. Two objectives: one is to strengthen the energy security, and second is to tackle the issue of climate change. Uh, this breakup uh, 400 is about 300 billion would be in the form of tax incentives, and about 30 billion would be for a green bank created by amending the Clean Air Act. There are some studies which say that though the plan is to invest 400 billion, but in actual practice, it would be double the investment. Uh, Objective summarized by the Democrats, Senate Democrats, are: one is, as I said, it is to tackle the inflation, that is to reduce the cost for the consumers, especially the energy cost for the consumer. So, this is the first objective: driving down the consumer's energy cost or reducing the inflation. Second is to strengthen the energy security by reducing the dependence on the imported fossil fuels. And the third is because there will be a shift towards the renewables and shift towards more energy efficiency that would reduce the carbon footprint. Uh, that would help reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Uh, of the total allocated, if you want to see the breakup, you will see that about 125 billion dollars has been given for renewable energy, wind and solar, uh, as well as for energy storage technologies. Uh, there could be a debate as to whether nuclear energy is clean or not, but from the American perspective, they would consider nuclear energy as clean, and they are making a provision of $30 billion US dollars for reducing the uh, dependence on fossil fuels and shifting towards the nuclear energy. As discussed earlier in the discussion on reducing the carbon footprint in US economy, huge incentives are planned for encouraging the electric vehicles, and about $13 billion US dollars have been set aside for encouraging the consumers to shift towards electric vehicles. We also talked about in the last lecture on importance or significance of moving towards more energy efficient appliances like lights, tubes, and so on. uh, More efficient refrigerators, more efficient air conditioners. For such a upgrade towards the energy efficient appliances, about 14 billion US dollars have been set aside. Same for service related improvement, the energy supply improvement, about 22 billion dollars have been set aside. And for encouraging the manufacturing in the renewables, and also for improving the energy efficiency in the manufacturing technology, about 40 billion US dollars have been set aside. So much money is been set aside for climate action in the IRA. uh, IRA, as we said, aims to decrease the residential energy costs by improving the home energy efficiency. So about $9 billion US dollars is in home energy rebate programs that focus on improving access to energy efficient technologies. And also 10 years of consumer tax credits are being provided for use of energy efficient technologies like solar rooftop, solar PV, solar photovoltaic technology, it means, or for you encouraging the consumers to shift towards heat pumps, which are more energy efficient, then for shifting towards high efficiency electrical heating, or by using more efficient heating, ventilation, and air conditioning appliances, as also for shifting towards more energy efficient water heating solutions like solar water heating or heat pumps. So all these technologies are being encouraged, and for that, there is a provision of around 9 billion US dollars. Uh, as was being discussed in the last slide, electric vehicles is receiving a big push, and not only people who can afford the electric vehicles, new brand electric vehicles, they are being encouraged, but also uh, there is a incentive for purchase of used electric vehicles. So about 7,500 tax credit is being provided for purchase of new electric vehicles, and $4,000 tax credit is being provided for purchase of used electric vehicles. Now, why the purchase of used electric vehicles is being encouraged? It has been encouraged in order to increase the access of the lower income people to this technology, because not all of them would buy electric vehicles, because the initial cost, the capital cost of that vehicle is high. So some would prefer to buy a second hand model. In that case, they would also be given a tax credit of $4,000. That is the idea. So this way, access to electric vehicle technology would be encouraged for all the categories of consumers, including the low and middle income groups also. Uh, the claim of the United States government is that this IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, would cut the global uh, greenhouse gas emissions. That is, it would reduce the carbon footprint, similar to that of the more cleaner economies like France and Germany, and it would reduce the carbon footprint of the planet and keep the warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade as per the target of the Paris Agreement. So this is the claim. And it also says that with this bill and other additional incentives which would be provided by the federal and state governments, the it is hoped that the United States of America can fulfill its pledge in the Paris Agreement. What was that pledge? That promise was about reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by the year 2030. So this was about how the money would be available from the government's perspective and how this IRA is going to help. But there is a criticism from the radical groups, the environmental groups. And what is that criticism? The criticism is that this bill this legislature, IRA, is not aiming to eliminate the fossil fuels, because the radical alternative is to stop using completely the fossil fuels, but that is not what the IRA is planning to do. Okay, so several groups, they argue that the legislation does not seek to eliminate the fossil fuels entirely, and hence it would be inadequate to meet the threat of climate change. One of the NGOs, it is called as Climate Justice Alliance, it says that IRA does have some strengths, okay, but the weaknesses are much more, and the weaknesses, they outweigh the strengths, and the threats posed by the expansion of fossil fuels and the unproven technologies, according to the Climate Justice Alliance. What are the unproven technologies? Uh, One is the carbon capture, which we said, that removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, technologies which are being proposed, those technologies, as well as the technology of hydrogen generation, which the United States plan to push, both these technologies are unproven, and hence banking on those technologies would not be a right way of reducing the carbon footprint, according to Climate Justice Alliance. So this was about how the money would go into the climate action.